Hello and welcome to Varnvlog solo. And it's super late. Um I am coming back from Socialist Trivia Night uh, for the Taylor Patton campaign, where I got second place and lost it all in the last minute on a question about when the the word socialist was coined, specifically when a certain French author claimed to have coined it in 1832, because I am pretty damn sure there's actually prior usage before that, but technically the question as asked was what it was, and I lost. Boo. I'm also going to answer a lot of questions that have come up in my comments tonight, and then maybe integrate with you. Yeah, I thought it had come up with the enragés in the French Revolution because Louis Blanc was already using the term socialist around like 1830, but apparently one of the associates of Louis Blanc claimed to have coined the term in an article in 1832, which is the way the question was asked. They actually mentioned the specific French socialist name, but anyway, it's not that interesting. Like the left often does, it was defeat from the jaws of victory. But I wanted to talk about a couple of questions that were asked me. One is about AI. I thought about doing a separate video for it, and then I was like, no, why would I do a weird video about AI? But I'm going to do this video so people can stop accusing me of having my things scripted by AI, but also know that I do limitedly utilize it for the solo shows. I actually don't use it for anything else, except to generate show descriptions. And I want to talk about that because a lot of people are becoming. Someone's like, "Oh, you recently started using AI for your show description," and I was like, "I've been using AI for my show description since 2023." Because it was incorporated into Buzzsprout that early, and it before that, all I would do for my show descriptions was copy and paste whatever media guide I was given by a guest, or I would just write 3 words on the topic and then copy and paste my credits. And I'd also do a works cited. And I really think the works cited is important because I do believe people should check my work. And if I was scripting purely with AI, obviously I would not care if you would check my work because it wouldn't be possible. But as people, if you've listened to me talk to AI skeptics and enthusiasts, and I've done both on the show, one thing you'll hear me talk about a lot is that AI is useful for parsing relatively large data sets, and getting consistent sorting from it. And I use it actually to structure me. So what I do, and I'm going to actually show you, I'm going to show you my screen too, so you can kind of see some things in a second, but I'm going to actually show up this. I have notebooks full of handwritten notes. In fact, I'm going to grab one that has more in it. Let's see what I got here. Wait, where are my ones with more in it? That I start to do the notes for the shows in. So, damn it. Here we go. I'll just grab the one that I was using this morning. Give me a second. So what I do is I first hand script what I'm going to be talking about for a month, basically. And I take it all down and I write down any hot takes, anything I've seen on Twitter, any interesting articles I've read. Then I go and I do something, and I convert those handwritten notes into often um, a rough series of an outline. I'm just going to show you an old one. Uh, yeah, yeah, I should have done with AI and not shown a blank notebook, right? So this is not blank. So then I do something like this. I'll share it with you. And this one is on an old diving into a wreckage article episode, not article. And you'll see here it's come on up. There we go. It's a list of nope. It's a list of articles and factoids and questions. All right. And this is actually what I used to stop with when I would do my solo shows. I would do something like this. I'd make sure to have it. And I would impromptu speak off of the facts on that list. The problem that I had is that I needed transcripts. I needed show descriptions that were SEO optimized. And I didn't want to pay anyone for it. And I never have. So if I didn't use the embedded AI in Buzzsprout and StreamYard. And yes, there's embedded AI in StreamYard, and I'll talk about that in a minute, because a lot of people who say they don't use AI for streams or whatever, they are, but not necessarily for the content. And so I run these notes through Gemini specifically, and then I'll get something that looks a little bit, this is for a future episode, but I'll show it to you, a little bit like this. And there's problems with this, and I'm going to talk about the problems in detail. And this is why I am very ambivalent about AI use. So what I get is, so I plug in all my numbers, and I'm going to be very clear. Do not trust any AI that currently exists on sources. I don't use it for sources ever. So I'll plug it in, and I'll get something like this, which orders the notes that I had and like throws it into key points, right? You can just look at this. If I read this verbatim, it would be obvious slop. But it does structure it so that it's set up for someone who doesn't understand the context to be able to understand it. Now, here's the problems I have with this, and this is when people go, "I've noticed some AI logic in your stuff." You have, because the way it restructures the notes follows a very neutral format, which does this media bias bullshit that is a fake dialectical method. So it'll be on one hand this, and on another this, but also this, the surprising thing that. And so what I try to do is pull all that out manually. The other thing I do is I check everything it pulls out of the article. I do not I actually have to prompt it when it says article. Do not use anything from your own database. Do not use anything that I didn't give you. And those are in the prompts. And then I pull most of this out. So for like this video, there's 45 pages of notes. All right. And I pull about probably 10 pages of the stuff that I get, and I do it by hand. Well, by copy and paste, but I don't like rewrite it. And so you are getting some things processed through an LLM to structure it better. Because what I was realizing is I had two problems. One, after my surgery, my aphasia got worse. And two, and I needed to make this more accessible. I did not have transcripts. I don't have anybody, and I refuse to take volunteer work. I don't have interns. because I think that's bullshit. And I either pay the person that I work with. So, guys, I paid people for the art, and I co-made and paid people for the music. Art was open source music. All right. I have used nothing AI generated in art, music, or anything. Once there was I pulled up a pre-existing font and use a filter on it, which I later discovered use LLM. That was from Canva. So why am I telling you this? Because I do think I'm very ambivalent, because even having the AI help me structure the articles and make them more accessible and so less rambly. I have found that it does still sneak in some of its own logic into the way I'm thinking. And sometimes I have to omit or argue with how it's structuring my notes. It does enable me to do this much faster. This still takes, for every half an hour you get, it takes me about 7 to 8 hours of research from the notebook stage. See this right here, to the typed in stage where I find the stuff to support what's in my notes, to the reordering, and then checking fucking everything. And you have to check everything, because if I don't, even when I give it its own sources, I do not trust AI to find sources. Or even when I just do a Google search now, because it gives me AI shit first, I have to make sure that it's actually not completely misrepresenting the sources. And it'll do that for sources I give it. So I still have to read everything, and I still have to check it. Now, this is a very limited augmentation. I've gone back and forth about the ethics of this. Beforehand, what I would do is off camera, and I'll just show you some of this. I would have bins and bins by my desk of articles that I would print out and take physical notes on, to be able to pull out and like have that notebook right there. And if I ran into a problem or like something that I missed, I'd Google it while I was on air. So all this is its own thing. I get why people hate AI. I get why people hate LLMs. I actually do think that there's all kinds of problems with it. We haven't been paying for the full cost of the energy and infrastructure. That's going to change. That's why these IPOs are being floated, and I want to talk about that in a minute. And that was why it seemed like it could be a labor-saving device. It's not a labor-saving device in all hands, because you have to check the shit out of it. It basically can do what an incompetent intern can do, but it can do it with much more information at a time than an incompetent intern. I am also thinking about moving over from a commercial model to taking an old laptop that I have and training DeepSeek just on what I want it to do. And I find that maybe to be a way to do this more ethically. I'm really torn on it. I'm deeply ambivalent, because it is much better than prior technologies at transcription, which lets me to able to give not perfect transcripts, as you often see when you watch these fucking things, but better transcripts for people who are hearing impaired, and people who want to search and archive my work. It also enables me to do SEO optimized show descriptions very quickly, and otherwise it'd just be shit. And you probably don't care, but I do want my stuff to be searchable. Now, I know this sounds defensive, but I just wanted to show you the process and be fully transparent about it, and know that I also am conflicted about how this is happening. Um, and I'm going to read the comments on you guys' responses so you can talk about it. But no, I am not having an agentic AI script the show ever. And I've been burnt by it before. There was when I first started trying to generate my curriculum documents for the show, I was running it through AI and not checking it. I would give it my notes and all the sources, and it would change the authors. It would find stuff in the sources that I gave it. And I don't give it books or anything because I also don't believe in feeding stuff into these massive AI conglomerated data that it doesn't already have. But if you're searchable on Google, it's already there. And I work through it like that. I found some of the arguments pretty convincing about the power and data use. I mean, the power and energy uses of a lot of this data processing stuff to be somewhat persuasive. The issue that I have there, though, is a lot of those logics go to other things on the internet that we don't freak out about. I also don't use it for art for obvious reasons because I don't want to deny people an income from art. Yeah, this is a good question. The ethics of AI are completely corrupted because there is a strange disincentive to using the technology because you're reinforcing the problem, which is true in one sense, but also inevitable because I am competing with things that put out 100 videos a week of AI slop. There are, and some of them, because a lot of YouTube videos were so shitty and formulaic anyway. When I go in there, it takes me forever to realize that this entire thing, images, script, everything about it is totally AI created. So there's like all these shocking movie videos, which I used to love, right? Because I'm that kind of dork. And I've just gone through and I'm like, these are all written by fucking Notebook XL and Gemini. Like, what do you think about the notion of LLM model commands? I feel like we are in the proverbial monk starting to look at the abyss of Gutenberg Galaxy like 30 like before the 30 Years War. There's a difficulty here because there is a logical problem with AI getting in a recursive loop with its own information and leading to information degradation. Particularly because how AI works is like by predicting things based off prior patterns. It's getting better and better at it. And for those of you who don't know about another reason about my ambivalence, my spouse works in bioinformatics and machine learning. And in my job, I am forced to use AI a lot. Forced to. I don't have a choice. I've been told I have to use it. But the problem that you have is there's been this massive amount of money dumped in the AI schemes, and there's been an attempt to get market capture by getting other companies dependent on AI and convincing them that agentic AI would allow them to replace workers. In most cases, that's not why workers are getting replaced. The real reason why more workers are getting replaced is stock buybacks. But not in all cases because it is a justification. There are certain kinds of like clerical work where it really does take jobs. But by and large, it is not effective enough to do everything it needs to do to truly replace people. If, and this is a big point, if the cost of the power and the water are paid by the point end user. They've been outsourced in a variety of ways, but even with like state tax forgiveness, water allowances, and all that they're getting, they're still not profitable. The market expenditure is extreme, and it was being done to get market capture and set monopsony pricing. The problem that you have is there's four dominant figures competing for it, and there is no way that people can see who follow this that you actually have profitability in most of these models. And as soon as Claude started being profitable and successful, they've had two problems. One, now their most recent model has been pulled by the government as a national security risk. And since Claude doesn't want to like go through and try to figure out who's a citizen, who's not, they pulled the entire model. And two, as soon as end users like Microsoft started having to pay for the tokens they were using for all this agentic bullshit, which is actually not what I'm doing. I'm not even have the scripts done by AI. I'm literally just restructuring notes with it and like arguing with it about stats and like then going and checking the stats that it gives me manually. Because I don't trust its sources, even when I'm feeding it the sources. I still have to go back and verify every fucking thing. But the problem that we have is that this could be, I mean, I really do think this could have been a useful technology. This is why I talk about the teleology of technology so much. It does make certain things, like when I used to try to have to modify stuff for students before AI, it was hours and hours of unpaid labor for about a half an hour of student work for one student. And I have 300. And I'm not exaggerating. I don't have any right now because it's summer, but I have 300 most of the time. And Claude was profitable for 1 quarter. It's the only AI company that's ever turned a profit. And as soon as it did, it started losing enterprise users. This is all kinds of problems here. But as far as like redundant clerical work, being able to make workers more productive, it does have some advantages. The problem that you have is that people are overusing it. They're using it for everything. They're not checking it. It's power consumptive, and most of the users aren't paying for it, which is how it got integrated in everything. This is another thing I wanted to talk about. I had to buy a new computer because the streaming software that I had so much AI in it before I even started doing any of this that it started eating up my RAM, and people were thinking it was that my internet connection was bad. And no, it was that these new browser-based programs that are used for streaming were using so much fucking resources with the AI backlog that they'd installed and everything that I didn't have the RAM to run stuff. My issue is we don't have people talking about the pros and cons of this. They see the cons are there like boosters. There's no real pulling out what would be useful or not useful under different circumstances for this technology. And honestly, I'm now like looking at Chinese models and stuff about how to do this, because the Chinese models, not because like the Chinese are like kind or anything. This is not about like how awesome the Chinese state is or how bad it is. That's not my point. They were forced to, by chip limitations, develop stuff that was more energy and processor efficient. And so the American stuff is, like these models are basically the equivalent of eight cylinder Cadillacs in the 70s. They use way more resources than they need to get these kinds of things going. I'm doing more research on it, and I'm trying to like be open and honest about how I do all this, because yes, I do use these technologies to speed myself up, but no, I do not script with it or just read it off. I promise you. And I can show you my work, which is why, for those of you who came earlier, I was actually literally showing my computer screen for how I generated something from this into, and I'll share this again, something like this with intermediary steps. So see, like, this has clearly been altered by AI. You can see it being structured that way. If you know how Gemini works, you know what that is. And of course, I wouldn't just read that verbatim because that would be fucking terrible. But Buzzsprout, my hosting service, has included AI since 2023. My SEO optimized podcast stuff in the interview show has been done by an AI bot for 3 years already. No one said anything about it. No one even noticed. When people started like seeing how much slop there was on the internet, they started looking at how some of our creators have been using it, and we've been using it for a while. What's the difference between AI development in China versus the US is that China for a long time had more chip restrictions, so they had to figure out how to do the same thing with processor capacity limits. So that's why they're actually beating us. It's not that their models are better, although some of them may be. It's that their models do the same thing on a much cheaper infrastructure and on a much less power and water efficient infrastructure. And they haven't been selling it to the public as a way to replace all fucking jobs. One of the things that happened in this recent, we've had this big stock drop, which the current IPOs are trying to take advantage of. But a lot of that has been based on the fact that it's now clear that not only is the public mad at everyone trying to be replaced by AI and gaining nothing from it, but it's also not really possible. As soon as the companies have to pay the full cost of the fixed capital that they're using, the water and the power, and it's not being subsidized by massive expenditures of venture capital, effectively, and private equity, the profitability of it goes down dramatically. It's only if you're someone like me trying to run something with no staff that it has that much use for you, because what I'm doing is just things I wouldn't do at all without it. You might not like it. I don't know how I feel. I am personally ambivalent about it. I'm just being very upfront about why I've done it, what I'm not doing with it, etc., etc., etc. I am not generating complete AI scripts. I promise you. All right, you can like I said, I've shown my notes. Yeah, the Chinese actually had to do some engineering with their software engineering. Absolutely. One of the things I've been happy about the backlash to AI is it's gotten people looking at the physical infrastructure of the internet altogether, and also the bias mechanisms of the internet. Now, people have been complaining about fake news for a while. That's not what I'm worried about. Nor do I think that the fair and balanced approach to something like ground news or whatever is perfect either. By the way, I'm not sponsored by anybody. I don't really take sponsorships except from occasional other podcasts on the free interview podcast that I produce out. I will take sponsorships from other podcasts and that, but I've never taken a corporate sponsorship. This is unmonetized. So, guys, I'm not doing this to like get monetized clicks. This is an unmonetized channel. The only thing that is monetized is my Patreon. Okay, so Varn, could you explain why the reshored Cayman money from Trump 1 is real and has been a stable source of VC for AI thus far? Okay, so I've made this claim before based on some research that I did. What we had is all these tech companies reshored all this Cayman Islands money around the end of Trump 1 and sat on it. They weren't using it for R&D. In fact, if you looked at tech R&D to expenditures from like 2010 to like 2019, 2020, 2021, they were really, really low. That paper came out in 2019 about using the same kind of technology that we use for predictive text on a neural network basis, and that could lead to emergent sorting properties. So it is more than just it is more than just predictive text. And then what you saw is an attempt to like sturdy up AI use by trying to push it on the workers, push it on the schools, push it on the public sector. There are things that I really do think it helps me on. All this compliance paperwork that I do in school takes me about, I would never, for example, oh my God, I would never consult on an IEP written by an AI. I want to be very clear on that. That's insane. But when I'm doing like compliance paperwork, I have no problem using an AI for that. It's stupid paperwork that just slows me down. And I was doing, 20 hours a week of just compliance paperwork for 300 fucking students. And here's the other thing. I do think we're going to see something like a dot-com collapse mixed with the 70s stagflation, because you have a bunch of overvalued stock, like Walmart's revenues, right, are close to its valuation. And it's very close to the original valuation of, say, SpaceX stock. SpaceX revenues are nowhere near its valuation. Claude is similar. Like Claude, I think Claude was valued at like 780 billion. The entirety of Walmart's capacity is valued at about 720 billion. And this is off the top of my head. I'm not even looking this up. I was just studying this the other day. And the revenues, even when Claude turned a profit, its revenues positively like 20 billion. Walmart's revenues are like 720 billion. What is the hack going on? What the heck is going on with the? I saw the chart with PE was seemingly lower than a lot of other tech companies. Nvidia is actually profitable because it's actually a fucking commodity, and it's incorporated in everything. Like, there's a physical commodity. These data centers are profitable for the people to building them because they're a physical commodity. Will they stay profitable? Probably not. Now, on the SpaceX IPO, it's clearly a grab. They changed all the rules except for the S&P 500. Thank God for that. So that all these index funds, which are passive investors, which is, by the way, a lot of the reason why you haven't seen stocks crash are two trends. One, people are like following the insider trading of Trump and Congress now. So people are buying with them, and it's just become a public secret that everyone knows. So they're all copying the pattern, which completely undoes any correction mechanism. And two, about 60% of everything is tied into index funds, which are invested in 401ks and pensions, which are auto bought. They're passively bought. No one's making business decisions. They are bought off of passive income and off of passive investment. And until you see other stocks crash and that realign at a consistent level, those corrections are thus way slower. It gives you more time to Wile E. Coyote over the fucking cliff. And you're going to see a lot of these drop shipments and a lot of these vibe coding. That's going to go away because if you got to pay for tokens, what I do does not cost that many tokens. Like none, actually. It's very cheap. But if you're using agentic everything and then you're vibe coding with agents and then you're having to have the agents also do the interface and you're drop shipping with it, you are burning through tokens, and that's not going to be profitable when you actually have an unsubsidized product. So yeah. The insider trading is just publicly known now. I think like that's there are literally people building AI apps to track congressional trading so that you can just autopilot it. But yeah, SpaceX is floating a very small percent of the business to create artificial scarcity and pump up the stocks. Also to get it tied into passive investing. there are lots of rules around this investment that were added, so people can buy in, but they can't get out for like 15 days. It will probably be very stable until the first mandatory reporting comes out. And when that comes out, which will probably, I think it would be, I don't know if it's quarterly or or biannually now. I'm very confused at what the rules are for this, because the government rules and the actual banking rules are different. And they're more and more different now. Yeah, I have looked into Michael Green and passive adoption. One of the things I do for a lot of the information I get, people ask me what I listen to. I don't listen to Left Podcast that much unless I'm trying to find something to argue with. I'll actually show you what is on my the first couple of things on my when I listen to podcasts, right? I'll put this real close. You will notice the very first thing, Patrick Boyle on finance. You'll also see the New York Times. You'll also see me listen to like another one that I listen to. I don't always agree with it, but it keeps me up to date on some stuff. How money works. And then everything else is like, this is Vinyl Tap, Hammer Horror, Lore Crimes, the Warhammer podcast. I don't spend my time. Like I do subscribe to Left Podcast. Give them an argument. What else do I have here? I Hate Bill Maher, Macro and Cheese, Moral Minority, all the specialists. If you like know the New Books Network, I have subscribed to all of them right there. So I listen to all this stuff and then I go and check it. And that's what I do. That's how I know shit. I mean, it's not like, yeah, I took like 4 economics classes 25 years ago, guys, and I worked in insurance for a year. So I do know how to read balance sheets and stuff like that. And I've read like tons and tons of books, but like, it's, you know, like you have to update yourself. And so I do that through a lot of like listening to just like a lot of the standard liberal stuff. But yeah, I think if all you do is listen to left slop, you're going to be very biased. Oh, this is interesting. I actually want to respond to this, and then I'm going to respond to Platner because I have my opinions on Platner make no one happy. Oh yeah, of course I've listened to This Wreckage. Like I fucking work with them. Of course I do. So yes. In fact, let me actually show you where it is in my feed. So if people think I'm bullshitting just because I'm definitely not. Where's it at? Where is This Wreckage at? Because it used to be higher up when it was Antifada. It may still be under Antifada, actually. I don't know if my computer actually recognizes it has a different name. Here we go. Yeah, This Wreckage. Wait, where is it? I know I listened to it. Holy shit. I'm a Patreon subscriber, for fuck's sake. Here we go. The Patreon feed right there. All right. So anyway, so last thing, essentially, capitalism is pure shit. Vulgar expression is in about every sphere of society, kind of, but more or less. I have no idea how to express this. What you've had is the commodification of things that could not be commodified through turning it into rental markets. But those rental markets are still dependent on a commodity form to work. If there are no commodities in the system, profitability goes down. You get a K-shaped economy, but then the K-shaped economy can't collect rents, and eventually it starts to collapse. Particularly if there's no other society as like a producer or a consumer of last resort. We're the consumer of last resort. China traditionally is a producer of last resort, but the tariffs have all fucked that up. So things are getting complicated. So this AI mass layoff economy crashing, the tendency of the rate of profit to fall that Marx keeps yapping about. No, there's still a tendency of the rate of profit to fall. Real commodity profits are still falling. The AI is a rentier market. It's about monopoly and monopsony power. And that's like the rational core of the neo-feudal thesis. It's just that is still dependent on there being some kind of commodity profitability to work. And that is why even in like nominal GDP forms, GDP can't get above like 5% anymore, because to get above that, you need a more profitable commodity production. Everything else is actually siphoning off of that productivity. And right now it's gotten so parasitic that it really could destroy itself. I'm not here to pronounce the last, the last final crisis theory. I don't do that shit, and despite being accused of it, because capitalists so far have found a way without political opposition to adjust to their own fuck ups. Those are the, I always said Grossman was right that there were counter tendencies. He just underestimated how many of them there were. So yeah. No, a lot of the billionaires think that they want a world where they don't have to deal with this anymore. Their accumulation of nominal and even fictitious capital. And this is another thing you have to realize. A lot of the capital valuations you see of like these mega billionaires are largely fictitious holdings off of equity holdings that if they tried to sell in the market at one time at an honest market, they probably couldn't valorize and their wealth would go away. But the best way they have to do to hide their wealth is to debt leverage it anyway. This is why you have Mr. Beast going on and say like, oh, I don't even probably have a positive income. And no, he doesn't, because as long as you are at least pacing the debt you're taking on, you can still make money, but hide your income by offsetting it with debt. Yeah, and the 1 trillionaire, correct. We'll see if he stays that way, but yes, right now. More interested in your thoughts on Rico and Texas and what it means. Well, Texas is a multi-ethnic state, but the attacks on him are going to get more intense. Also, it's very clear that we have a concentration effect amongst the Republicans. So a concentration effect is like when you have a flavor, right? Let's just say I have this shitty LaCroix. It's not that shitty. It's okay. It kind of tastes like strawberries and peaches yelled at some sparkling water, but whatever, like I'm yelling at you, that is a flavor here. But let's say I poured this into I pulled a bunch of this into a pot and reduced all the liquid down and was only left with the syrup that was mostly the essence at the end. That would be concentrated. It would taste like shit, but that would be concentrated forms of whatever flavor this is. This is also true in politics. It's true in religion. So like you think about today, white evangelicals have less political diversity than they historically have ever had. I'm gonna put my notebooks back up. So, and why is that? Well, it's because the only people attracted to that are usually now attracted to it for political reasons. A lot of them don't go to church anyway. But there is a signaling concentration effect for the people for which that appeals to. And I think that is super important to notice because you see more and more ideological intensification that is not theologically based at all. And it actually gets more intense the less of society is religious. So you get more you get more people who are attached to this for ideological reasons. They're not very educated, even in their own religion. So what that means, as far as like the concentration of ideology is in Texas, and this is relates to Talrico. Kim Paxton, who is a cretin by any my most even conservative measures, has become more and more important in Texas politics. But also you have this MAGA concentration. You're seeing all these people who are broadly popular outside that actually did have some kind of a popular base beyond the GOP, lose their seat and be ousted in the Republican Party. That means also when they fight people like Tallarico, who can appeal to like a faith base or what, but it's still relatively progressive, as opposed to like Jasmine Crockett, whose progressiveness was mostly the demographic that she was from. And the fact that she would talk a lot of shit. But like if you look at her voting record, it was pretty bad, actually. So Tallarico has this broad appeal, but you're going to see these attacks amp up because you have a concentrated ideological effect. The id is off. They're not hiding it anymore. And so you're going to see these attacks get nastier and nastier. You also have another problem, and this has been a problem for the Dems for a while, and this is what I was going to mention about Platner. In fact, I'm going to show you this comment. This is someone I actually like. He's a regular commenter on my show. I'm somewhat hesitant to show comments because I don't want people coming at people, but I think this one guy, I've done whole shows and comments he's made, so I don't feel bad sharing it. So I'll share it in a second. Let me just dig it up here. But Tallarico is also part of this and why it's become so important. It's not like Southern or reactionary states are like a new thing where they've never had Democratic politics before. I mean, like hell, when I was in Georgia, there was almost always Democrats until Sonny Perdue became governor and during the Bush election, and then the party didn't even change; it just changed sides. All the conservative Democrats just changed their allegiance to the GOP and pretended they were never in the Democratic Party. But nonetheless, this came up on the episode I did today on the cut porn theory of everything with TLR. By the way, video, probably not because it's coming from me purely. I don't believe in that shit. But to be fair to Jason, that's also what the article was called. He was just entitling it out of that. But this is the comment I want to share. And I even share my initial response and kind of expand it out a little bit because I was almost rude and I like this guy, so I don't want to be rude. But anyway, there we go. Let me pull it up. Oh no, Flatlander's talking about Platner again. I love y'all. Y'all are comrades, but I really wish people would leave our state alone, especially a New Yorker like Kyle, who lives in New Rochelle, which is basically NYC. Most locals don't care about weird online nonsense. He's an oyster farmer who lives in a rural part of the state who comes across as authentic and blue collar. He isn't, and he's not. I mean, he might be authentic. I don't know, but he's not blue collar. Who isn't super polished and who genuinely cares about working class people. I don't know what's in anyone's heart. I don't care about what's in anyone's heart. I want to be very clear about that. You don't know until someone's actually governed if it matters who they care about. It is the same reason why people like Troy Jackson. And my response is, and this is what I want to get to about Platner. The problem is that your possible senator needed money from outside the state to have a viable campaign. You can't bitch about your politics being nationalized and then speak as if you know someone's soul and no one else can comment. Sorry, you can't have one without the other. And here you have to have outside money to have a viable campaign against the DNC. If Bernie PAC, our revolution, and its NGOs had not gotten involved, none of this would have mattered. But Platner wouldn't have had the money to wait it out. If you ask us, that was my aphasia kicking in. If you ask us for money, we get to have an opinion. This is the problem with all this stuff. And I've talked about this a lot, right? A lot of you are getting played to give money, even to people whose politics might be good. I don't know Graham Platner's soul. I do know that he's a little bit feckless. And I know that from reading all kinds of stuff he said on Reddit, which is all over the place. He is opposition to the Iraq war and still serving in it. What he said about Fallujah. and the token cock tattoo that Ryan Grimm is trying to convince me that Graham Platner is too stupid to have known what it meant. Despite many people who knowing him said, yes, he did. And you know what? I don't really care about that. All right. I'm a former right winger myself. Okay. You can find, if you really look, you go back in the Internet Archive machine and you know what I was writing under. You can find all kinds of shit that I probably said in my 20s. All right. I was an opponent of the war too, as a conservative. Right. I didn't serve in it though, and I never worked for any military contractor, even when I was abroad. I've never worked for the government. I've never worked for the government beyond the municipal government. I've been a teacher for a long time, so I guess I have worked for the government, but I've never worked for the federal government. And part of that is principle, because I've had the chance. So when someone goes, how do you feel about that? I'm like, I don't know Platner's soul. He might be a good guy. He might have redeemed himself. But what bothers me is progressive journalists like Ryan Grimm telling me that the working class soldiers have no idea what a Totenkopf is when they're a special unit in Croatia. Sorry. Don't fucking pretend I'm stupid and then say, oh, I'm speaking for the working class while also talking about the working class as if they're fucking dumb. So that pisses me off. But two, Platner is viable economically and could wait out mills because of donations outside of Maine. Period. Now, I have no idea how Platner's going to govern, but neither does anyone else. He has no governing history, and he's been all over the place in his statements. He might be amazing. And the reason why I've been somewhat more concessionary towards him is because the attacks on him are getting more and more ludicrous. Right? But my point is, these controversies both make him appealing to a certain kind of progressive who now wants someone who's willing to have a Smithian relationship to the other side. And I understand that. That makes perfect sense to me. And also, like, I get the anger at the DNC. If I was in Maine, despite all of my reservations, which I would still have, probably would have still voted for him. I wouldn't, however, be like pretending that all this is because he was ignorant. Because I don't know that makes me want to vote for him anyway. Like, and whoever advised him not to just own up to it and say he changed his mind and it was dumb was not advising him correctly. But let's throw that all aside. I don't know how he's going to vote. Here's the thing. The last person like this that Bernie Pac backed was John Featherman. And I call it Bernie Pac for a reason. It explicitly comes out of our revolution. And there's an entire cottage industries of NGOs, from the Justice Democrats to other things, some things a little bit more nefarious, that go behind it. And the most money they spent on anybody other than Bernie Sanders was John fucking Featherman. Jacobin wrote the articles about them, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I am not a populist at all. I, in fact, think it is premature for us to be running people beyond the legislature at state levels. All right? But I understand how this works. And I just don't want people being suckered by the hyperbolic bullshit on either side. Like, Featherman probably really does care about, rural blue collar Maine. It probably really, not Featherman, Platner. Probably really does. I have no reason to doubt that yet. I also have no reason to think he's going to be effective or not. It doesn't matter what people feel in their souls that you are projecting upon them. You cannot know. You can't know what's in my soul either. Maybe I'm secretly a super dick who is going to who's going to break bad in a few months. I've worked for some people who did that. Of course, I've noticed a lot of like this corruption talk. I talk about corruption and decadence all the time, but I don't do it on a spiritual level because I don't share spirituality with most of the American public. But when you have like Ziad Jalani coming on and like getting mad at AOC, who he used to stand for like crazy, because AOC was like quiet on the Platner issue. I just can't take it seriously. Like, I just can't take it seriously at all. I'm not even an AOC fan. I have said many, many harsh things about our favorite Ted Kennedy staffer. But they're scrambling to find another Mamdani before we even know if Mamdani is going to be long-term effective. Oh, it's JG's here. The libertarian version of this is that if Tom Massey became president in 2028, he'd change the world and there'd be no structural barriers. Yeah, it's crazy. We all have our Bonapartist delusions. And my point about Bonapartist delusions, left or right, is they have a class base whose interests are always going to be conflicting. And the only way you can keep those people in your coalition is two ways. Culture war bullshit, of which a lot of these Platner debates kind of are, or authoritarianism to force people to stay in. Those are your options when the interests are that divergent. But the entire apparatus of left-wing media has the memory God gave a fucking goldfish. No. I want to actually pick up on this, and this isn't the chast issue. I just want to. People are scrambling because the world is going to hell in a handbasket. So who am I to judge? That's exactly when you need to judge. I've been saying for 10 years, you need to be better. You need to be smarter. You need to train. You need to be disciplined. And I get things are getting worse, and the left is dysfunctional. There's no organized left. Yeah, so fucking what? We've been bitching about it my entire life. Fix it. Fix it. And if you don't know how to fix it, come together. Because I don't know how to fix it either, but I've been doing the research and handing it off to you guys specifically so you can use it and learn what I can't in the regions that you're in, because I am in Utah. That is where I am at. And you can use that to develop what you need to develop. All right. I'm not saying that people are desperate. That always makes sense. You have to judge ideas, actions, and you have to judge them harshly. I actually do think, and I have many critiques of Michael Brooks. People get mad that I critique Michael Brooks because he was my friend and he died. But I think people got mad that I critique Mark Fisher because he was my acquaintance who I was very fond of, and he died. Call no man happy till they die. That means going all the way back to its reporting in Herodotus, not that you're only happy in death. That's not what it means. It means that you can only judge someone's ideas in totality when they are done. Yep, it's Aristotle. It's Aristotle pulling from Herodotus. It's attributed to this guy Metellus. But yeah, Aristotle actually does whole chapters on it. I did a video on it, Reclaimed. It's coming out soon. My point in all this is just to say like, as things go to hell in a handbasket, which they kind of are, they kind of have been for a long time. And the other thing I get pushback on is people think because I have urgency that I think this is going to happen fast. This is a long, ugly process that is divided and uneven and punctuated. There are times where you'll just feel like it's been in a slow decline since the 70s, and there are times where you'll feel like you're in fucking free fall. 2001 to 2003 felt like fucking free fall. 2009 to 2010 felt like fucking free fall. Now feels like free fall. Things are unwinding, but people often take this feeling of unwinding and over conclude from it, even if everything is going on full blast. And make of that what you will. I mean, I think things are going to get kind of bad. I don't know how they don't. We're like the US, for example, could be relatively energy secure if it was to put in export blockages, but if we put in export blockages for energy, we'd probably be in much bigger wars much faster. Furthermore, that's why we're going through our strategic reserve, though, because to maintain any kind of oil market, we're going to have to do that, and we're blowing through it. And it's not just us; it's the entire planet. We also are getting hit by a El Nino or a super El Nino. The last super El Nino cost the world something like, in 1980s money, $1 trillion in lost agricultural produce. And you can throw the money out. The money's not the important thing. It's the scale of the damage. And add to that we're going to have fertilizer shortages, and we've been having climate change induced weakening winter wheat crops and stuff worldwide for a while. Things are going to get bad, but they probably won't get bad in one apocalyptic boom unless there's a nuclear war, which I don't really think is in the cards right now. Although it's a non-zero possibility. There are lots of non-zero possibilities that we can like get all up in arms about. Sometimes it feels like we might be at civil war here, although what basis for that is hard to say. Sometimes, very much the United States legal structure is devolving. Maybe good or bad. The entire world legal structure has devolved somewhat. Things are always bad for some people. And so it's hard to take that things are going to get bad when you're in the hood or adjacent and it's really dysfunctional. I mean, like, I grew up in an area that, like, parts of it barely had fucking like basic like utilities, and I didn't grow up in the third world. I grew up in central Georgia. Things have been bad there since the late 90s. What you were saying about there is a gap between people who can go home to their parents and those who can't. I can't stop thinking about it. There's cultural groups where a family takes you in no matter what. Well, there's two things. Like, I say in America, that's usually a sign that you are downwardly mobile. But if you were, for example, in like rural Mexico, of course your parents are going to take you in. They'll take you in forever, even if they barely have a home themselves. But in the United States, that's probably not going to happen. There are cultural variances to the way capital is administered. So, I think this is something to really think about when we think about like how we deal with kinship relations, what that means. I really emphasize that. I do think we have to change the way that we think about that. No, I mean, like, I was telling someone the other day that I was horrified. I mean, some of this is mitigated by certain kinds of rent control, but I was horrified by doing the math on the median income in New York, which is higher than the rest of the state, and the entry level price of entering the New York market. So if you weren't already in New York and you made a median income, your likely rent's going to be like $3,000 to $4,000 a month for a 600-foot apartment. That is the median rent if you're not in a rent control unit. And the thing about having a rent control unit is you already have to live there. My unpopular thing is I think socialized housing is actually preferable to rent control. And people yell at me like I don't understand economics, but there's a reason why there's a dialectical tension about where rent control is. Rent control happens to be palatable in places that have historically had the highest rents, but also they don't drop median rents. They just slow down their growth. You need actual socialized housing. Like, I would be a YIMBY if the housing was socialized. Build more housing. But like, if you're building more housing for profit, which Mom Donnie is actually doing, and just allocating it for affordable housing grants, which by the way was done under Eric Adams and de Blasio too, and it did shit. Then actually what you're really doing is subsidizing land developers. I'm not here to also, talk about Mamdani yet. It's too early to say. I will say that I've been very frustrated with all the people who talked about the magic of him fixing the budget when he just reallocated some amortization of the pension fund that was poorly allocated by Eric Adams making a bad deal, and got some additional funds from the state legislature. Because that's not something you do to fix a budget every time. His pet-a-terre tax, which, yes, there's all kinds of opposition to it, actually it doesn't bring in hardly any revenue. It's just not that important. It's symbolically important, but it's not even a proper wealth tax. If building houses doesn't lower prices, how do you explain Austin? Building housing only lowers prices if there's no other way to valorize the property. Otherwise, you write off the losses on your taxes at rate. And by the way, Austin's also having just a general market crash, period. We've been building houses like crazy here in Salt Lake, and it has stabilized rents, which is exactly what I predicted it would do, right? Because it makes sense. Because you can write off rental loss at full value as a profit loss in almost every tax code in this country, there is very little incentive to lower rents. The only way that these things tend to offset rents is that building more houses will actually slow rent growth because there's now market space for that. And either inflation will catch up or some other part of the economy will start slowing and they will drop rents accordingly. But until you see that, it generally doesn't drop, it stabilizes. Now, I don't know why all of you fucking communists became supply-siders all of a sudden. Although supply and demand does matter. I mean, like, even Marx talks about it, because value is not priced. Which, like every dumb conservative person who's critiqued the Marxist critique of labor theory of value, because the Marxist theory of value is actually a critique of Adam Smith's labor theory of value, but neither here nor there. We can get all caught up in that. But it is kind of a labor theory of value. But yeah. So if you were to change the tax code, it would lower the prices faster. But again, that's not what most GMBs want to do, because what you're doing is subsidizing building. And if you think about like China, well, that's a completely different model for all this. So no. So how do we change the tax code? Well, there's problems with that because so much of the taxes are tied up in bonds, and bonds are actually not even regulated by national law. They're regulated by international law. YIMBY is yes in my backyard. It's been used for like a supply side. A supply side argument about lowering prices by building more housing. And I'm not saying that would never work. I'm saying there's reasons structurally according to tax code. And there's another problem that I talked about in the video on unions, and I talked about tenants unions. You can valorize the value of property from things other than rents. And like you can't valorize the value of non-produced commodities. I mean, most of the tax code is written by and for the wealthy, even before it was by corporations. But yes, and also like international law is governed by things like the IMF. I mean, like, yeah, and there's also the housing being a primary equity asset / retirement vehicle, which is a poison pill. It actually really does mess up any kind of development to fix this. But when I say I'm like, when people like talk about me and like they talk about me as I'm like I'm a NIMBY, I don't have a problem with building more dense housing, because I think it's energy efficient, and it stabilizes rental costs. But I think when you're like making big promises, you need to look at the entire economic matrix and not just one element of a supply chain. Yeah, LA's right. I am for socialized public housing or even subsidized public housing. I would even accept that. Rent control is okay. But it has issues. It very much favors people who are already in the community. It does get offset by raising rents in other areas, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Go into the difference between yuan, renminbi, and MMT. Oh, I mean, if you want to really get into this, what are the reasons why China has never, like, you would hear MMT, it's like, why doesn't China do MMT? And I'm like, well, because it would raise the cost of its manufacturing prohibitively, and end its ability, its influence over capital as the producer of first resort. It does, however, lead to some kind of bind, because as long as that's the case, China needs massive external markets. And where are they going to be? They're going to be in India, but India is not high income. They're going to be in Europe, but Europe, even though altogether it has a small population, but it's super old, and Europe has a lot of other problems. Or it's going to be America, which has tons of fucking problems, like way more than Europe, but historically has had large levels of liquidity and an unwillingness to pump up consumption through a debt market. So to slow this down a little bit, that means if you wanted to use the yuan as a world reserve currency, and you wanted to use it as a world reserve currency with high levels of investment, it would unfortunately raise the price of all products produced in China on the world market. And you need the world market if you don't have, and you don't want to encourage even, a massive amount of consumer spending within the country. The other thing for the West, and this is something that, like, think about how China was crucial to neoliberalism, even if it wasn't a neoliberal society itself. We can go back and forth with that. I don't really think it was. But but during the Deng period, is that having low cost goods and low cost inputs from China, even if you were doing the finishing here, meant that you could offset cost of living increases from service sector inflation, which has been constant since the 1970s. Okay. Service sector inflation was formerly offset because a lot of services don't even get included in the inflation index, including the most important ones: healthcare, housing. All right. Static services that have inelastic, to use economic terms, demand. Those have been inflating since the 70s, and they never stopped. That's service sector inflation. That was offset by cheap commodity goods. Once you broke down the international supply line through tariffs and whatnot, and through COVID, and through over relying on instant production and not having warehousing and not paying for that, what you've created is a scenario where all forms of inflation are going to have to pay service sector inflation, and it's a spiral. If you are the reserve currency of the world, this is somewhat inevitable. If you don't have a production offset elsewhere, and you can only offset production so much with automation, even though it's the primary way employment in the industrial West was actually reduced, not outsourcing, despite what people think. It was mostly the increase in organic capital, aka investment in automation, even before AI. And it really kicked up when a lot of the countries like China started having higher living standards, and that actually meant that you needed to produce more with just machines. The problem with if everything's produced by machines, you only have fixed capital, and if there's any price competition at all, there's a price pressure down, and your costs are static. Unlike workers, which you can treat as variable through various means of management, through intimidation, through lowering and raising prices, et cetera, et cetera. Your cost for a machine stays relatively constant, adjusted for inflation. Now, the other problem that you have is most of the capital we have is capital based off of equity promises and futures. And that's only really, you can only really say if it's fictitious or not once it is valorized. So you were bringing up fixed and variable. Yeah, no, fixed and variable capital is super important for understanding capital flows. But back to why MMT isn't done by China. If there is no consumer of last resort, raising your production cost is a disaster if you're primarily an export economy. And that's going to be a problem if you try to run the yuan like an MMT style currency, which is all MMT style currency speculation is really based off of ancient empires, right? And periods where there is a global hegemon strong enough to impose credit relations outside of its own borders. Because otherwise, MMT assumes a closed system. And what do we know about closed system economics? They don't work. So if you do MMT style policies, you either inflate your currency, right? Or now, not just because, and that's not because of supply. I'm not a supply equals inflation guy. It's more complicated than that. There's all kinds of, there's monopsony pricing power, offsets of debt. One of the things that are changing the situation now is even if the U.S. Federal Reserve, for example, would have relatively high interest rates in the past, because for whatever reason that's not entirely clear to me, Japan had relatively static interest rates that were like -%. They were actually trying to get some inflation because they were basically almost in deflationary conditions for like 20 years. But what that meant for investors is they could go borrow in yen, have it at like 1% or less interest rate, transfer that yen into dollars, and actually offset borrowing cost in the United States by borrowing in Japanese yen. That is also ending too. So that's part of the inflation spiral. If you introduce a new currency into all this and they do the same thing, they'd have to operate in the same way. China's not going to do the same thing. I actually think this is actually like very smart of the Chinese government. So this is not a criticism. They aren't doing MNT policies because they understand what it would do to their production costs, period. And that would also mean that they'd have to encourage like a highly consumerist lifestyle, which also would be disastrous, in terms of like other knock-on effects, like energy use, large amounts of stupid bullshit plastic, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So they can't afford to float their currency because it would mean that they would start having affordability crises they don't have. But there's all kinds of problems. There's declining power of foreign consumption everywhere. There's also K-shaped developments and declining power of domestic consumption in most middle and high income countries. Um, the sky isn't falling, but it sure as hell is cracking. Uh, so yeah. And yes, there's a definite relationship to political power as the primary producer of the world. There's a lot of political power comes from that. So, but a lot of MMTers, I know, we would get very frustrated when I would point out that like China doesn't do MMT policy, and I would just try to explain to them why. Because MMT policy is rational in certain scenarios. And even for us, we're running out of the ability to leverage things like cheap production elsewhere. And so that's why you have like attempts to crack down on service sector inflation or whatever. But the thing is, it's like, what does it lead to? I don't know. Like, I mean, literally in the case of some of these billionaires, particularly these tech billionaires and one trillionaire, at least it's something like a death cult. Because they literally realize they're engineering a social reproduction problem. They're just like, oh yeah, maybe it's better if humanity dies off because we don't want to have to deal with even social reproduction costs. I wasn't expecting to rant about this, but yeah, there's your rant. I was just expecting to come on and explain when uh um when or when not this was coming. I mean, like this Curtis Yarvin shit. What I was more surprised at, and like, in the international, the what is it? The no, not the international, the interracial theory, cuck porn theory of everything article. I was just aghast at my young liberal friend, who I will give credit. He did not lose his shit, and he did explain himself. But I was aghast at some of the assumptions about the economy, because they clearly come from somebody who only looks at like economics textbook balance sheets, and who also does not disaggregate everything that goes into like GDP. I don't think GDP is worthless. I don't agree with the people who say that, but GDP doesn't track like all things value added in the economy through commodity production or even rents. It tracks capital flows. So large capital flows between high levels of investors, even when they're not particularly profitable, or even if they don't have a lot of revenues, those aren't necessarily the same thing. Um, it still will show up as high GDP growth because you're moving money around, and that moving shows up as capital development. Now we don't have another easy way to track it, so it does mean something. But it is very misleading unless you really parse the sectors that are being added up to parse GDP. So it is meaningful, like, but it's not meaningful in the way a lot of economists think. And so you hear a lot like the American economy isn't bad. Well, the American economy has been on a K-shaped direction since the fucking late 1970s. And it has been profound and getting more and more profound and like exponential numbers every decade since like the late 1990s. And so saying that everyone is just imagining, like when the kid was like, oh, they're lonely and they don't have jobs. I'm like, why don't they have jobs? Do you think they just want to stay home and play video games and you're somehow morally special because you went to college? Like, why don't they have jobs? Um, But anyway, I mean, I do think the kid isn't wrong about the relative sociology, but then even that's a little bit um skeptical. Um how are we looking at this at South Africa disparity rise? You know what? I'm gonna ask and I'm gonna check. So let me see what I can find real fast on coefficients. What is the Gini coefficient of South Africa? And look, there's some wild story about Gini coefficient came about. I should actually look it up. But so the Gini coefficient of US is in the upper middle, but it's not very good. And for those of you who don't know, the Gini coefficient is like a rough approximation of inequity. The higher it is, equitable. Right now is 41.8. That's real bad, actually. That's although like the other place where you see high Gini coefficients are like in the developing world, like Guatemala has them because like one billionaire will like completely skew the Gini coefficient. But what is it in South Africa? So let's look at the Gini coefficient of South Africa right now. Okay, let me look it up. So I got that date from the St. Louis Federal Reserve. So in fact, I might pull that up in a second. So let's look at with South Africa. All right, South Africa's crazy. It's 0.67. So it's like 26 points above ours. It's one of the highest in the world. Let's look at the UK just for comparison. The UK is 3.5. I mean, it's 0.35. Excuse me. Sorry, I'm going to read this out. Which means it's gotten a lot worse, but it's still better than say the US. And so let's look at like countries with decent and bad Gini coefficients. And I know this is going to make some people uncomfortable because, and this is as of 2022. So it used to be that the US had a lower Gini coefficient than Mexico. We've now caught up with them. Yay, us. So let me show you this. This is just from Wikipedia, but it's a chart from the World Bank. So just take that how you want to take it. But anyway. So to show you what the Gini coefficients are, the worst are down here. If you look down here, and then through here. So Brazil, Colombia. It's relatively bad, and all of Latin America except for one little country. Anyway, let's get back to this. The United States used to be closer to Russia, but it tripped over. It went from like 38 to 41 in the last 10 years. COVID was a massive shift of Gini coefficient upwards, and these tech billionaires have really skewed it. But then like the countries with good Gini coefficients will surprise you. So like, is that which Stan is that? That one. Eastern Europe, and that's not because it's great, but then also Scandinavia, which is not surprising. It is weakening, but still okay in Western Europe. It's okay-ish in Egypt. That's because under development, actually. But like the Americas just look like a shit show with the exception of Canada. So yeah, it's Kazakhstan. Thank you. I knew it was a Stan. I was trying to remember which one. And Gini coefficients don't account for socialized goods. They don't account for public infrastructure. They also don't account for like being skewed um, by like small populations and relatively very poor populations with like one billionaire. Um, it is also subject to epistemic nationalism, like all of these stats. You have to try to disaggregate these stats from their nationalist basis because we collect them by national basis. Because the other thing, if you were like to look at regional Gini coefficients in the US, it would be wildly divergent. And yeah, Mexico does have a lot of public access assets which are usable by poor communities. Their quality is actually increased under Scheinbaum in particular. Like for example, people are like, Mexico has socialized medicine now. I'm like, no, Mexico's had socialized medicine. It was just really shitty until very recently. So there you go. None of these stats are perfect. And one of the things I'm trying to teach you when showing you these stats is they do mean something, but you can't take them on face value. You have to disaggregate them as best you can. And it's hard. I mean, I make mistakes all the time. Or I forget. One of the reasons why I started to go back to where we started this video, one of the reasons why I started scripting these videos is I would forget crucial information. So one time I said that like the GDP per capita in Ireland has surpassed England. And I forgot the per capita part, right? And that's crucial because the population of Ireland is only 1 million more than the population of Utah. Like, so that's an important bit of it's still very damning if you're England, but like that's an important bit of information. Okay. So that's Varn tries to. One of the things that you have to do, and I come down on Jacobin hard because they tend to, and a lot of DSAers tend to do this bullshit too, where they move between different definitions of stats depending on how they want to. So like Carl Bayer, the DSA blogger was like posting about DSA income earnings without correcting it for age. So someone's like, oh, all the DSA is trust fund accounts. That's not true. And people's like, oh, they're all PMC. And he posts this thing. It's like, well, the median is like 80K, but like 20% of the DSA has income under like 30K. None of this deals with wealth at all. And the other thing it doesn't deal with is age, because of course a bunch of 20 somethings don't have very high income yet. Period. End of discussion. It's like when people will call, AOC working class or blue collar working class, even because she was a bartender in college. I know millionaires' kids who were bartenders in college and had nominally very low income when they were in college. It doesn't say that much. What do you think of the Mamdani, Nikya, etc., walking back to 2020 BLM to fund the police rhetoric? Well, I always thought defund the police was a bad rhetoric anyway. Because I've always been, you either abolish it and replace it with a people's militia, or you crush it through oversight. Defunding the police was used in the Southeast when I was a kid by Republicans to save money. And what it actually ended up doing was like lead to like fees raiding and corruption everywhere because the police still had all their guns. But what I don't like is this like socialist law and order shit. I do admit that like it is easy to feel crime is not a problem when you are very removed from it because you're in a well-off community. But I will also admit that heavy policing and incarceration, no matter how you look at it, and I just did an episode that's coming out on this. I recorded it yesterday with this writer on prisons called Matthew Whelan is a good dude. Spends a lot of time in prisons, doing prisons and interviewing inmates in Alabama. But he went through the criminology with me, and we were both pointing out that there's also no evidence that high rates of incarceration and policing fix this at all. That non-economic violent crime is often mitigated by better divorce laws, and economic crime is better mitigated by dealing with the social factors that encourage it. But defunding the police was already a concession to liberal like wonkery. The thing is, though, like I do think a lot of the way the democratic socialists in power have moved is like just a good government's rhetoric, like pretending that there's no class to the government at all, which to me is like kind of absurd, particularly in a place like New York. So yeah, and I know you might go that my answer about defunding the police with people's militias is like utopian, but it's basically what most socialist states did. And some of them had like other kinds of police like the NKVD, but it's important to note that was part of what was going on. As far as like Sam is talking a lot about Mexico, I also lived in Mexico and I can back up a lot of things he's saying. I lived in Mexico for 2.5 years. No, I'm nowhere. I'm not I'm not an expert. Obviously, I like mi español es poquito, pero entiendo más o menos. So I speak Gringo Spanish. But I do understand Mexican street insults, so that's fun. If you're in North Mexico, I don't understand it for Southern Mexico. Sorry. So yeah, I've been thinking about absconding back to Mexico lately. So, in fact, I'm going to be in Mexico next weekend. Any thoughts on the Peruvian presidential election? I'm depressed about it. That's all I'm going to say. Yeah. No. Like I feel like I feel like as a gringo Mexican partisan, like I always think about all those Irish who like changed sides in the Mexican American War, and I'm like, I probably would have done that. But yeah. A couple other things. My book. I don't have my physical copies yet. I need to call. They were sent to Cut in DC, and so he's got them, and I got to get them. But my book is printed. It's done. It'll be released on the 25th. We'll be doing a live stream on the 25th. Both Emancipation here to announce it. It'll be fuck. It is written. It is done. Unlike the other 3 books I promised that are not written and are somewhere in these notes I was showing you earlier. Yeah. Let's see. Is it this one? Is this the outline for the other book? Like so, yeah. Like let me show you this. This is like a book that I abandoned. Since I'm being like full transparent tonight, I'm just like showing you my fucking notes. It's weird that like people are interested in this, but whatever. I'll just show it to you. So like here's an outline on what I was going to do, a book on Mordecai, right? Like here, like, oh, I'm not showing it to you. I forgot to hit this button. Sorry about that. Like, And so, yeah, you guys are getting way too much insight into my process. But like here, you can see it's just notes and notes and notes. Right? Like, and then let me see. No, I'm gonna have to get down again. And just tons and tons of backup material. Oh, now I'm in a weird phase. What the hell's going on? There we go. Nope, that's not what I wanted you to show. What's my note-taking active learning method? So I one of the things I do with my notebooks, let me find one that actually has stuff in it. Other than the one that I've been drafting current stuff in. I was trying to find an older one. Is this one? Did I put my used? Oh, no wonder. My used notebooks are down here. No shit. All right. That's why. Now you saw more of my don't look at my mess. All right. So when I read a book, I keep like a running log of what I'm reading and what's going on. And I do that when I'm listening too. And I do it by hand on purpose. Even when I use stuff, even when I put it into Google Drive, I start on paper because, and this is actually important, the time it takes for you to physically write it down and process, you have done thinking and incorporated it into your mind. If you type fast, you can type so fast that you're just stenographing and you're not processing what you're reading. So that is part of it. It's a very simple strategy, but I teach it to kids because one of the things you want to do if you're trying to learn stuff, you really want to learn something, right? You want to break it down to where you're not trying to binge it. I always tell kids, like, think about if you binge all your food and you're going to go exercise the next day and you need calories. If you binge it all the day before and you're not keeping a regular and disciplined calorie regimen, what's going to happen? You're going to vomit and you're going to lose the nutrition. Same thing comes with cramming or trying to do too much at one time. So you try to break it up by processing it like in reflective journals and shit. And I really do think, and I know this strikes a lot of people as weird, you should start on paper. That's why I have so many notebooks, like, because I just reach for them all the time. But like, see way too much in my office. See, I just have tons of these. Just I keep little ones so that I can do it pretty much anywhere. And I can have this in my pocket. And I also read a lot. Like, I'll read a book, physical copy, and also with an e-copy, so I can go back and search it later. And so, like, when I write it down, I can write it down in this, and then I can go and pull up a PDF of the book, hopefully one that is procured legally, and then search the book again for what I found and wrote down, so that I can then copy the quote verbatim. Whoa, my camera. Into my Google Drive. Do I recommend listening and reading at the same time? If you want to speed up your reading, listen and read together. Absolutely. I don't do that anymore, but when I was a kid, I'm dyslexic and aphasic. I want to be very clear on this, and this is like proof that you can do it. I'm dyslexic and aphasic. When I try to, I can read between 100 and 800 pages a day, depending on the kind of stuff I'm reading and the amount of time I have to devote to it. Right? I used to be an extremely slow reader. The raise that I increased it was one, focal point eye method, and just like making sure that I didn't waste a lot of time. So like I often read with like something like this, so just to keep my eyes focused on one thing so I don't get distracted. And I would listen to it back in the old days. I'd listen to like an audio book on cassette and the book at the same time and try to speed it up. if I could, to speed up my reading speed. How do I choose what to read? Whatever interests me at a given time, because if it's boring, I'm not going to read it. But I find things interesting that other people don't find. Like, I am fucking fascinated by Soviet infrastructure. I am fascinated by reading about Fordist infrastructure in America and the political implications of that. So like how not having a Robert Moses period means it's harder to organize in California than it is in New York, right? Like a lot of people find that shit boring, but I find it interesting because what I try to do is apply everything to everything else. And I started off, when I first became like an avid reader, I didn't even read that much nonfiction. I read mostly fiction. And then I read a lot of poetry, because poetry is just for reading training, and no one fucking likes this because you have to read closely now anyway. But for reading training, it's what we call intensive reading versus extensive reading. So extensive reading is reading a lot fast. Intensive reading is reading something that has a lot of ambiguity and stringing out all the ambiguity from it. So that's how I train myself to read well and a lot. So that's what I would tell you to do. I'd also say, don't be afraid to read shit that other people might find boring. I threw this up in a Discord today. I was talking to my Discord people, and I threw up this, and I was trying to figure out the history of all the weird shit in France and how so many people went all these weird stuff. How did communization come up? And I'm reading like the Congress minutes of the international conferences of the communist left. I've also read a lot of the stuff from the Comintern too, like the Comintern Congress's debates, and stuff like that, because it just gives you really insight, not just into decisions that were made, but how they were made and the implications downstream when you apply this to other things that you know. So yeah. But I will tell you, if you train yourself to read intensively, the problem that you're going to have is you're going to read too slowly. And so what I do, this is how I can read so much stuff fast, is I read extensively first. I do that stuff with the reflection notes like I was talking about, and try to write down anything that interests me as I encounter it. And then I go back and reread those parts very slowly and very intensively. So I still do intensive reading even when I'm reading fast, but like I don't do it as my first read because it just takes too damn long. And if I did that all the time, I'd never finish anything. And I feel like I'm trying to like teach people something that is like a dying breed, because most people barely fucking read at all. So yeah. Okay, I hope that you guys actually found that helpful, me talking about reading practices, right? Because I don't feel like people teach this anymore. Do they teach you guys this anymore? I try to teach it to students, but they look at me like I'm crazy. Y'all got silent. You're like my class. Not even in uni, huh? So I've actually been really thinking about doing stuff, because I get asked for this all the time, and I've been like, oh no, I want to teach these deep socialist history, and I hate all the podcasts to do socialist 101 stuff because they're often not very good. But I've been thinking about the stuff that I teach for my day job more and more about how I interact with you. That's why I started structuring myself instead of trying, because like I can talk for fucking ever. I'm good at talking. I can fucking talk all day. But I've been thinking about like more structuring it. My first attempt at that was like the Radical Engagement series, where I literally did intensive reading with every text live with you. But people got frustrated with that. And I got frustrated with it because I also started realizing that people were still using me as a substitute for reading the text, and there's only so much I'm going to be able to do about that. Do you think there's some opportunity to integrate LLM in the note-taking workflows? Yes, I do it all the time. I mandatorily have to do it at work. But it actually does. That's one of those compliance things that used to be a pain in the ass, like taking minutes of everything. Now I just hit a summary on the transcribe. I check it. I also make sure the transcription. I would not do this with formal legal documents because you have to check it because it will hallucinate all kinds of shit. But yeah, that's one of the better use cases for it. But yeah. Well, guys, it's very late for me. There's a lot of you here for the middle of the night. Those of you on the East Coast, do you sleep? East Coasters, are you do you guys like sleep at all? I'm an insomniac. I used to only sleep about 4 hours a night, and then my body started breaking down. Don't do that. It's bad for you. Oh yeah, it's Sunday. And West Coasters, you guys, and night shifters. Okay. I'll be honest with you. This is actually some of the best numbers I've gotten. It's in the middle of the night. Burlesque class in the morning. More power to you. Oh yeah, yeah. Our Australian contingent. I don't know. You people and you Kiwis and Aussies, for some reason, like me, you're actually a disproportionately high amount of my audience. So are Canadians. I don't know what that's about. A boot. So what? A lot of you are West Coasters. Okay, I'm a mountain man. I live in the mountains. I literally live on the side of a mountain, actually. I live in Kearns, which is I live on the upper end of Kearns, so it's on the mountain. It's where the poor people live on the mountain, as opposed to the East Bench in Salt Lake, where the rich people live. I'm not poor, but this is where I could afford to rent easily with enough place to have an office to podcast from. So yeah. Ochre Mountain doesn't count. You're right. Fair. I like how you spell that in a way that makes sense as opposed to like the way it's actually spelled. Reclaimed. For those of you who don't know, between Deseret words and indigenous words, there's a lot of bizarre spellings here in Utah. It's not great. If you're not from here. You Paiute words, which I'm not going to complain about. I mean, like, I don't want to, like, obviously not complain about indigenous words. Although they didn't choose how they were spell ending, they were transliterated either, so that's still kind of our fault. I watched Big Love forever ago, and it was before I lived down here. Guys, I'm like old. Well, I guess I'm, not like old. I am old. I'm not that old, but like I'm old enough. My favorite is still Tooele, which is spelled Thule, and I can't get over that. But like, I grew up in Georgia, which has a lot of indigenous names. They're just completely different, like Okefenokee and Oconee and Chattahoochee and all that. It's different. It's a different language base. It's not, Ute, Paiute, or Nawa. It's it's what we would call Cherokee. So yeah, I do look useful for 45. Thank you very much. It's hate in my heart keeps me young. So all cities have Spanish names, and we complain about immigrants. Yeah, there's that too. Um, oh man, I do miss Thunder Jesus. That wasn't Aztec though. That was Keychain Mayan. But anyway, um, oh, if I had to give my amateur theory for why you're big in the other Anglophone countries, is that we're familiar with the debates on the show through Trotskyism, but also we feel like there's no place in the existing sects. Yeah, you know. Well, I mean, the funny thing is, I'm also like kind of familiar with the debates in Maoism. I just, like, uh, oh, you started to find gray hairs. So my hair used to be black, like naturally. Everyone's like, MT asked me the other day if I was putting highlights in it. That's gray, friends. Um, uh, but yeah. Um, so anyway, uh, I find as I get older and grow my hair out, people are less confused about my ethnicity, which is, uh, I like to say I'm of the beige persuasion, slightly off white. But anyway, still pretty white though. Um, uh, have you ever considered moving to a garden hovel? Oh, yes, I have. I can also, guys, for a little while I was a monk, not a Christian monk, a Theravadan, Shramana, which is a novice monk. I wasn't a bhikkhu, but like I lived I lived on a mat. I didn't sleep on anything off the ground. I owned nothing. It was actually kind of a comforting life. Actually, I just didn't like the celibacy part of it. You know, but I actually don't mind. You know, I don't want to. I don't want to like romanticize poverty. And one of the things about being a monk is you're living off of other people's labor, really. Um, but but like I did like a remarkably simple life for years. Like when I was living abroad, I tried to make sure all my tangible belongings could fit in the 3 suitcases. I can't do that anymore. Came back to America, fucked that up. But yeah. Melungeon. Who's a Melungeon? I mean, I kind of am actually. Um, but anyway, when I was just tempted to become a CD. Yeah, I mean, it's. Where would the book be available for those outside the U.S.? So, I mean, the book is actually from a European press in the first place. I don't know where you're located, but it has plenty of European distributors. The press is technically in Finland and the UK. Um, so yeah, no, my books are crazy. My books are crazy. Um, and that was always the problem. I usually just have massive amounts of ebooks so that I wouldn't have to carry them around. But I don't like reading poetry and ebooks. That's why most of those books are poetry. I also like having physical copies of like reference books I pull out a lot, like my Marx stuff and a lot of my ancient stuff. It's all over there. Can I buy it in the US? Not on Amazon. Yes. I don't know. I know that I was told you can, because there's multiple US distributors, and there are some places in bigger cities that will stock it in person. But I'm gonna ask if you want me to. I'll announce on the live stream like where you can buy them if you don't want to buy from Amazon. I completely understand that. If you want an ebook, you have to buy it from Revo in Europe. And that is worldwide available, but they take their payment is in euros. Will there be I'm gonna try to get it in Salt Lake. My books, all my books, unfortunately, are never sold in the city I fucking live in. Like my poetry books are like all over the southeast, right? And like they're available on Amazon. At least my first one. My second one, I'm a little bit miffed because it's been back ordered now for 5 years. Um, oh, I've read a lot of Tom Stoppard. I love Acadia. I also love there's like this play about Lenin and a bunch of people meeting in a cafe in Switzerland. It's really great by Tom Stoppard. Um, you want me to do a audiobook, but the thing is it's hard to read that book, Mad, because it's like a combination of Tut and Mai's voice. And Tut is very precise and calm, and he writes like it too. Where I am an emotionally unbalanced lunatic. So like it's kind of a different thing. Um yeah. Many years ago I wrote something where a man climbs a mountain to see a wise monk at the top. He gets to the top, walks up to the monk and yells coward, and then walks back down the mountain. Yeah, I kind of feel that way. That hits home. There was a time that people used to criticize me because I would be like, particularly when I was in my 30s and abroad, I was just like, I would just love to disappear and not have to deal with the world anymore. Um, but uh, yeah, Varder to do it. That's a good idea, actually. Oh yeah. Tut can be a little bit more combative online. I mean, but so can I. Weirdly, I actually try to moderate myself on Twitter, because there was an early form of me where I just insulted everybody. Like I'd wake up and be like, "What is Orleans Magazine doing today?" Um, and that's a deep cut joke, but whatever. Anyway, it's 1 in the morning. I got to get up in the morning. I got to record a bunch of stuff. I'm getting ready to travel. Just a reminder, uh, I will be in the Northeast of the United States for about 10 days, and I will be available at events in DC, 2 events in DC. Um, uh, One event in New York at Woodbine on the 24th of July. And an event in Philadelphia. And yes, I am willing to go elsewhere if you are willing to help me cover travel. And I don't mean you personally, but like an institution. Like I don't want your money. I want institutional money, because a lot of you don't have enough money to give me anyway. Um so yeah. I wish all of you a great time, a good day. If you're in Australia, enjoy the Australianness of it all. And stay alive, protect your peace, read better, and I will see you all. I don't really drink alcohol anymore. Probably because being an unstable lunatic is probably worse with alcohol. Just saying. Um, I think I've had like 2 beers in 2 years. Um, so yeah. But I'm gonna get some rest and then wake up in the morning and do this all again. Um, I really appreciate you all. I really vote for Platner. Yeah, dude, if you're a main, do what you want. I'm not. People think that I really hate Platner or something. I find this really bizarre because I just like he seems feckless, but like also Mills and Collins can suck it. So do that. Protect your peace, guys.